Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock, let's go over the market, let's talk about what is happening to Tesla, what we can expect moving forward, and all that good stuff. So if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, etc., I do share my thoughts with my members every single day the market is open, as the market is trading. For the first tier, it's just $3 a month. The link is down below. Mainly includes Tesla, sometimes other stocks when I see opportunities, or $5 a month includes everything in the first tier. So Tesla, sometimes other stocks, plus NVIDIA as well. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day pretty much flat, up 0.14% on the day. Some volatile movements intraday, but ultimately ended up pretty much doing a whole lot of nothing, closing at 236.19. So tomorrow's a pretty big day. Why is tomorrow a pretty big day? Well, simply because tomorrow is OPEX. There is a lot of puts expiring. I actually shared it with our members here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was down here somewhere. Yeah. No, it's not that one. It was one of these posts here. This one, 4.5 trillion of options expiring on tomorrow's OPEX / triple witching. Most of it is puts. Market makers are going to keep price pinned to max pain zones to try and reap maximum profit. So what does that mean for max pain for Tesla, right? Tesla's max pain right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's actually 235, I believe. Let's double check that. Yeah, 235 is the max pain. So don't be surprised if Tesla potentially doesn't do too much tomorrow. I mean, you never really know, obviously, right? But max pain is at 235 with something like tomorrow, expiring. I wouldn't be surprised if market makers want to essentially try to keep, most stocks, because believe it or not, most stocks are actually near the max pain right now. NVIDIA is 120, for instance. Google's at either 162.5 or 165, one of those two. I forgot which one. Amazon is, I believe, 197.5. Meta's, I think, 590. Apple, I think, is like 212 or something, or 215. Most of the max 7 is right around max pain. So don't be too shocked that maybe we get some wild movements intraday, kind of like today. But if essentially price ultimately stays relatively flat, I mean, again, you never really know, but it just wouldn't shock me if that actually did happen. But anyways, let's talk about the actual technical analysis, right? What did price action give us any new information today, right? That's the question. Well, it actually did a little bit, not too much, but definitely a little bit. The first thing is going to be this 15-minute little bull flag, right? You can make the argument that this bull flag, of course, is, well, I mean, a pretty little bull flag, right? Because this move to the upside felt pretty impulsive, right? Which is a nice sight to see, right? It wasn't just like a slow bleed up, it was like a nice, pretty aggressive move to the upside, which is what I like to see off of lows like this. And now we essentially started consolidating, and better yet, Tesla, if you take the Fibonacci from this low that we had pretty much right over here to this recent high that we had over here on, I think this was Wednesday. Yeah. The Fibonacci, the 618 Fibonacci pretty much sits at about 330 or 230, right? Which is exactly where we actually dropped. I don't know if you remember, but Tesla did have this kind of random spike down. You can see right here on increased volume, which is, I'm not going to lie, a little concerning, but nonetheless, it spiked right down almost exactly to that 618 Fibonacci and bounced almost perfectly right off of it almost instantly, which is a nice sight to see though, however, right? So you can easily make an argument this is a nice little retracement right with this bull flag as well, and we actually closed the day breaking out of this bull flag as well. So let's see how that plays out tomorrow, and let's see if the bulls can find some continuation or if the market ends up pinning Tesla pretty much right around max pain zone, which will be around the mid 230s. That's kind of the question moving forward. So let's watch for that moving into tomorrow. Now, the 1 hour is where things are also pretty interesting, right? You can also argue the 1 hour is kind of doing like a sideways bull flag, right? Which kind of looks something like this. You can see we're having a lot of support and resistance below and above. Every time we wick down pretty much below 231, 232, you can see it's starting to get bought up. Like all these wicks right here, you can see they're getting bought up pretty quickly, right? We're not really able to keep the price down below about that 231-ish region for too long, right? Especially on the 1 hour chart, right? You can see it's constantly getting bought to back up. However, the opposite is also true, where every time Tesla wicks anywhere up here, so essentially the high 230s and like slightly peeking our heads into the 240s, you can see selling pressure starts kicking in. So essentially it's a battle between bulls and bears here as to which one will break. Again, maybe I'm biased, I don't know, but I do slightly lean in the bullish favor for now. Obviously, I mean, anything can happen naturally, and especially in this kind of market, a bit of a kangaroo market that we're in, of course. But I do like the fact that it is, again, the 15-minute with a little bit of a bull flag. I like the fact that, the 1 hour has this potential inverted head and shoulder setting up right here, which potentially can, be a nice sight to see. I still like the fact that, we couldn't break below, despite this, kind of, aggressive selling that kind of hit Tesla. Where is it? Let's see. I think it was right here. Yeah, it was this one right here, I think, right? Despite that aggressive selling pressure that came in on Tesla, the point is we still kept above yesterday's low, which is a nice sight to see. And I have a sneeze coming up. Give me a second. Excuse me. And again, we still have those patterns I mentioned from yesterday, right? We of course have that bullish island reversal pattern right here with this kind of price action. You can see massive gap down into a massive gap up, and this price action is left by itself. That's a nice sight to see. The daily still has that abandoned baby candle pattern right here. Also good. And the point is we're holding that, right? We're not coming back into those levels. I mentioned yesterday how losing about 229 would be a bit of a red flag for me, right? That would not show that bullish momentum continuing forward like I'd want to see. And we got pretty close to it this morning. We got pretty damn close to it, right? But the point is we held, and we actually closed towards the upper end of the day as opposed to the lower end of the day, because Tesla did open the day up about 2% to the downside. So all these things are not too bad, right? Not too bad at all. Obviously still more work to do, but the bulls are they're really trying, it feels like, right? Now, what is the next step for the bulls, right? What else do we need to do, right? Well, we have the 9, or rather the 8 and the 21 EMA down here. You can see the green and red lines over here on the verge of crossing bullish. That's good. But what we really want to see, like what Tesla really needs to do, because they've crossed bullish here before, right? It wasn't enough. So what does Tesla actually need to do? It needs to not only cross them bullish, but like I said many times, price action and those EMAs need to start closing above the 1 hour 50 EMA, right? Which currently is sitting at about very high 230s. Essentially, we'll just say 240, to make it a little bit easier and safer, if you will. So yeah, that's something that the price action wants to do, right? Tesla needs to start getting the price itself plus the EMAs above the 50 EMA. Once that can start happening, which maybe it'll happen tomorrow, probably not tomorrow, honestly. I think it'll be early next week, Monday or Tuesday. I think that's when that'll probably happen. But once that actually does happen, that's when we really start getting that trend shift. That's when I think the momentum can really start shifting to the bullish side, because you can see, right? The whole ride down, right? The whole ride down. You can even argue, technically speaking, you can even make an argument all the way from up here at 415, arguably, right? Why? Because you can see this is the first time that they both once again crossed back to the bottom, right? You can see the 8 and the 21 crossed bearish, and they also went below the 50. Great. And you can see it got pretty close to crossing back up here, but potentially a bit of a bull trap here. You can see they ever so slightly crossed to the upside. That's not bad. But it's not the most convincing cross, right? A bit of a bull trap, you can argue for sure. But nonetheless, what happened right after that? Well, it crossed back down once again. And then let's take a look. Let's just kind of follow this path down. You can see a nice little move up over here. You can see one of them crossed to the upside above the 50, but the 21 could not. That's why I like to, if I'm being really cautious, if I'm just really I want to be extra safe, or at least have better confirmation. I'd like to wait for both of them, right? Couldn't get that there. And then what happened after that? That's when the true selling pressure came in, and you can see this whole time it's just been a full-on bearish crossover. You can see, and this is where we're pretty much at now. We had two bullish crossovers here, but they couldn't get above, and price couldn't get above, especially the 50 EMA. So again, bit of a false flag. And now we're getting close to another attempt here. You can see we're kind of getting tight, right? The EMAs are starting to get close. Because you can see when the selling pressure is intense, right? When it's like very aggressive, and when the selling pressure is just relentless, essentially, right? Or buying pressure, but in this case, selling pressure. You can see the gap between these EMAs is very large, right? You can see that, just how intense that pressure is because of the large gap between them, right? They're not even close to each other. But now you can see, if you look at it much closer, they're much closer. They're much tighter, right? Which signals that there is a potential for a trend shift, a shift in momentum coming up. Now, obviously it's not there just yet. I'm not saying it's there whatsoever, but the fact that it's getting this tight tells me the fact that, there is a possibility of it happening soon, right? Sooner than later, potentially as well. So that's what I'm kind of eyeballing right now, right? And obviously this will require some patience. We're not there just yet, like I mentioned many times, but something to watch for over the next, couple days or so, maybe into early next week, definitely. So that's what I'm mainly watching for, to be completely honest. That's probably the main thing, ultimately. What else is there? Just to kind of show you an example of what this can look like. Look at NVIDIA, right? Same idea, right? You can see over here, also had a lot of issues, had that bearish crossover here back when it was at 136. Same thing, right? Just complete, utter bearishness, like the markets, right? And what did NVIDIA do? Well, it was one of the first to reclaim them, right? Remember I mentioned this before? It was one of the first to reclaim it right here, right? This was getting pretty close. Obviously, you could wait for the 21 to cross as well to be extra safe, and it did on this gap up right here. And look at that. It's been overall showing some decent strength, right? Some pretty respectable strength, right? Just kind of consolidating in what I look at as a potential bullish wedge. I actually think NVIDIA is going to move up pretty soon as well. Needs better confirmation still, but I think it's looking more likely than not, in my opinion at least. But nonetheless, the point is that, right? Or AMD, another good example, right? Finally got both of the crossovers right here, and look at this. It's been showing strength. It's just been showing strength in this kind of market, right? Which is a nice sight to see. Google, for instance, not able to do that just yet. I think it's close, but it's not there. Amazon's also very close, not there yet. but it's getting very close, right? So just to kind of illustrate that point that I'm trying to make, I guess is what I'm trying to do here, right? Just, to give you an idea as to what I'm looking for instance. Another good example, last one I promise, is Boeing. Same idea. Bearish crossover all the way back here, bearish trend, and look what happened, right? Once both of them crossed over, nice little setup in this little bull flag right here, nice little impulse move up, sideways bull flag, and look at this beautiful follow through on Boeing. Another good example. I actually missed this one, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Can't get them all. But just to give you an idea as to what I'm kind of expecting or waiting for, if you will, for Tesla stock. And now I did actually re-enter my shares. Again, I'm entering Tesla a little bit aggressively. Not gonna lie, but I said tight stops. But yeah, just something to watch for on the 1 hour. Now, moving over to the daily chart really quickly. The daily chart is pretty interesting. Why is it pretty interesting? Well, obviously there's still work to do. We're still below even the daily 8 EMA. So, there's definitely some work to do here. The 8 EMA is currently sitting also at about 240, pretty much in line with that 1 hour 50 EMA. So pretty important level, this 240-ish region. It's a level that the bulls absolutely want to start breaking. Ideally, the sooner the better. But what happened today on Tesla that's pretty nice is, well, obviously we still have these bullish divergences that still exist on the RSI, but more importantly, the MACD has officially had its first bullish crossover on Tesla all the way since it's had its first bearish crossover all the way up here. Let's take a look at where that bearish MACD crossover began. It pretty much began all the way up here when price closed at $430 per share, and it's pretty much been bearish ever since. Very relentless. Like if I zoom out, Tesla went from one of the highest readings it's ever had on the daily MACD to the lowest reading it's ever had on the daily MACD in the span of a few weeks. Like that is not something you see every single day. Like this is, again, very abnormal, but nonetheless, it is the situation that we're in, right? But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that after many failed attempts, you can see over here, it kind of got close to crossing, but not, my goodness, very close to crossing, but not there just yet. Got pretty close here, not there just yet. Now we finally got it. And the best thing is usually when you get a bearish or a bullish crossover at very high or low extremes, which it was up here and it now is down here, that's usually pretty meaningful. Now, can this be a false flag? Can the market continue to flush lower? Of course, anything is possible. It's not just like, this one indicator right here and congratulations, it's going to go higher. No, but it's a good sign. And it's essentially another check mark to the list to add to potential bullish catalysts that are starting to, in my opinion, set up for the stock. It just needs that extra push. You know what I mean? It just needs that extra little lift to really get things going, which, hey, maybe we get it tomorrow. Who knows? But that's something I'm watching for moving into, again, as early as tomorrow to potentially early next week. I think something around there should give us a better idea as to whether or not we're finally ready to make this move higher or not just yet, right? Not yet. I mean, maybe even potentially go lower still. Not sure just yet, right? Nothing is guaranteed. But those are the main things I'm looking for in the 1 hour. In my opinion, if we start crossing those EMAs above the 50 and the price action goes above 50, that should be a pretty good sign in my opinion. Next step would be a pretty quick rally, in my opinion, to about the 250s here. That'll be the next level to break, which we resisted at 2 times over here, arguably 3, you can even say. That'll be the next step to break. And then from there, I think we're off to the races. So that's the main things I'm watching for right now moving forward on Tesla stock and kind of the way I'm eyeballing it right now. So let's ultimately see how it plays out. And if we get a nice strong day tomorrow, which would be phenomenal to see, and if by some miracle we close closer to 250, we will get another very beautiful hammer candle on the weekly chart. So tomorrow could be a pretty interesting day to see how we actually close and to see if we can get another very bullish looking weekly candlestick pattern developing or not. So I think that's about it, right? There's not much more to say. I think those are the majority of, the things, if you will, that I'm looking for on Tesla stock moving forward, to see if we can really get this bullish momentum sort of, actually, actually do something on the stock, because again, the stock is extremely oversold, very, very oversold. I don't think this is going to new all-time highs anytime soon or anything like that whatsoever, but I do think it's, the stock is pretty beaten up, man. It's like shockingly beaten up. It'd be pretty disappointing if it doesn't get some relief, again, relatively soon. Now, obviously, to the downside, right? It's not perfect. Right? There is still risk to the downside. Let's very quickly touch on that. If Tesla essentially loses 229, roughly 229, yeah, about 229, that would be a red flag to me. That would be a concern. I would then assume that the low 220s is in play once again. Break below low 220s, we see about 215, 212. Break below that, we see about, I think it was probably the 180s, around the 180s I think it was, and break below that we see the 160 on the daily, which is the green trend line. Those are the main levels to the downside. I don't think it's going to happen personally, but in a market like this, you really never know, which is why you have this little, I have this alert here, because that's my kind of stop loss on these shares I entered today at like 231 or 2, something like that. But anyways, yeah, that's all I got. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.